I want to start by saying that we are really glad that you could make it today. We know this is a difficult time, and we really do appreciate that you're taking a moment to talk about school catalogs, and more specifically, to learn about how a school catalog can be a professional upgrade for your school. So my name is Oriane. I will be your host today. I am the manager of the Pilates School Approval Program, and I have our guest speaker with me today, Joanna Talaga. So Joanna is really qualified to talk about today's topic because she is the co-founder of a Pilates school in New York, which is called Harmonious Pilates, and her school has been PSAP approved since 2018. And she also owns a studio. She's a nationally certified Pilates teacher, and she was trained by the Pilates Center in Boulder, Colorado. And impressively, she's been teaching Pilates since 1999. She also gives continuing education courses not only for Pilates teachers, but also physical therapists. And I've been working with her for about 2 years. And I can tell you that she is extremely passionate about education. And she actually gave a presentation about school catalogs at our 2018 Teacher Training Summit, which was in Hollywood. And so we are extremely happy to have her back today with us. All right, so before we dive in, I just want to say that everyone is muted and you cannot unmute yourself to ask questions, but you do have a chat available, so please feel free to type your questions during the webinar. So for those of you who are on a desktop, the chat feature is on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you are on a mobile device, then you can go to the menu, which is on the upper left corner, and then you will see the chat feature in the drop-down menu. And you can submit your questions throughout the entire webinar, but please know that Joanna is going to answer them towards the end of the session only. And also, if the presenter square is bothering you because it's covering important information on the slide, you can pop it into the sidebar by clicking on it. And don't worry if you miss anything, we are recording this webinar and we will publish it on our website next week and you'll have a chance to watch it again. So finally, anyone who attends this live event will receive 1 CET and we will email your certificate next week. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to turn over the time to Joanna. I hope you all enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Oriane. Hello, everyone. Before I begin my presentation, I just wanted to acknowledge the seriousness of this situation that our Pilates community finds itself in because of the pandemic. So I very much appreciate that you have decided to spend these next 45 minutes with us here. Thank you. This webinar is for the whole Pilates community. It is for representatives of schools that have already started the PSAP application and for those who are considering starting the self-study report. But it is also very much for everyone who has a Pilates school and is looking to give their school a professional upgrade, regardless if they're applying for PSAP approval or not. And if your school is in the process of applying for state license, you will find this activity of writing a school catalog helpful in clarifying your philosophy and fine-tuning all the components. Every time you participate in a professional development event, you raise quality of our Pilates education system, your status as Pilates teachers and educators, and help the whole Pilates community positively influence the public's perception of our profession. So in this presentation, I will talk about the reasons why Pilates School needs a catalog and how to express your school's unique qualities and breathe some life into this otherwise measured and objective document. Anyone who tackles writing or updating a school catalog gets a bit lost or overwhelmed at times. So I will point out some strategies that helped me through when I was upgrading my school catalog. And for me, who went from a 4-page to a more than 20-page publication, the process was definitely tedious and at times frustrating. But it was invaluable because just having to closely examine every single policy and procedure of the school that I already ran for 16 years made me pause and think about how effective or ineffective each one of them was and compelled me to make improvements. So the first reason, next slide. So the first reason why you need to have a school catalog is because it is time to join the ranks and start following educational industry standards. Pilates School is actually a vocational school, which is a type of an educational institution. When a student graduates from a Pilates teacher training school, they graduate from a vocational school because they can make a career out of their education. So we should bring the standards of our Pilates schools up to the standards of other educational institutions. Standard requirements for all educational institutions is that they must have the school catalog and the enrollment agreement. Those two documents are a record of transaction that the student and the school enter into. Enrollment agreement is a legally binding contract signed between the student and the school, where both parties agree to a set of rules. The school catalog is a part of that contract. So it should be clear that if we're in the business of educating future Pilates teachers, we should not only provide them with the highest quality education, but also make sure that our schools meet the highest standards of education industry. You're most likely already run your school according to certain philosophy, have set curriculum, calculated the tuition and fees, have methods of assessment, as well as various policies and procedures. Now you just have to write them down, expand on them, and make sure that they're clear. So aside from the fact that the school catalog is a requirement because your school is an educational institution, what other valuable benefits does the school draw from having a catalog? Well, first of all, having a school catalog shows that you're taking a leadership role in Pilates education because you care about legitimacy and accountability. Including all necessary information in your school catalog establishes your school's legitimacy as an educational institution because it demonstrates that you follow sound business and educational practices. It also provides accountability for the student and for the school. Accountability for the student because it clearly states the demands of the program and outlines what is expected from the student. Accountability for school because it is the school's pledge to offer a solid program. Another benefit is protection, because as I mentioned before, school catalog is a part of the record of transaction between your school and the student. So it is an official source of reference in case of a dispute between them. The school catalog is a comprehensive resource that serves as a way for you to introduce your school to the public. If the prospective student has never heard about your school, then naturally you want to make a great first impression, right? If your school catalog is not informative and easily accessible, then you're missing out on drawing in new applicants. So how exactly do you construct a school catalog to make great first impression and promote your business? First of all, by presenting the information with clarity and transparency. Clarity is needed to ensure that the prospective students understand what your school offers, as well as what is expected of them. When you write your policies and procedures, this is a moment to think through and possibly organize and document some policies and perhaps that are a little bit unclear at the moment and not even maybe disclosed to the students properly. You cannot be responsible for how a student interprets information, but you can at least make sure that the information is clear and available. And for new applicants, when you paint a clear picture of how things are done at your school, that gives them the opportunity to make an informed decision to enroll in your school. And that decreases chances for a dispute, which in turn increases graduation rate. Transparency is needed when dealing with the financial aspects of attending a program. Students should be informed of total as well as itemized costs of attending each program. Refund policy should be well explained. And again here, being transparent about how the school conducts day-to-day operations, handles issues that may arise, and maintains a healthy relationship with the student is one more factor that may draw students in and entice them to want to be a part of your school's environment. Clarity and transparency make for very effective long-term marketing tool. Effective and long-term because you're taking the first step in marketing to the public that you are a solid institution with sound educational and business practices. The accurate information you include in the school catalog will attract the right students, and those students, after graduation, will in turn become your school's best promoters. School catalog is also a vehicle for connecting with compatible students. You're including your school's brief history and your school's mission and goals right at the beginning of the catalog. It is a straightforward way to present your school's philosophy to the public. It is an opportunity for your school to attract like-minded people who wish to pursue the Pilates profession and will identify with your school's philosophy. Additionally, what may attract the right student to your school is including detailed information about the curriculum of the program or programs that your school offers, as well as detailed cost of attending. PSAP website provides a template of a school catalog. It is accessible at www.pilatesschoolapprovalprogram.com. When you get to the website, click on For Schools. That'll take you to sample templates, and then that will take you to school catalog. The template is easy to work with. You can work on it in Word, or you can create your own layout and just use the template to help you organize your content and write narratives for specific elements in the catalog. The next two slides show the full list of the school catalog table of contents as it is included in the PSAP template. As you create your own catalog, make sure that all the items that are in the template are included, but also feel free to add more if there are more characteristics that describe your school or the programs you offer. And here's a sample page of the sample of the catalog page. The instructions are in blue and the sample narratives are in black ink. Worth mentioning here is that the template includes some important verbiage that every school catalog must contain. There needs to be a clause regarding such issues as discrimination, prospect of graduation, employment. I will point out where in the catalog they should be placed and will give examples how to construct them. So before you begin creating your own school catalog or improving the one you have, I have a few suggestions how to simplify the process. First, read the template to familiarize yourself with what information needs to be included and how the narratives are constructed. Then collect the data that you will need so you will not have to be delayed by searching through your resources or wait for others to give you information. And I mean simple data such as square footage of the studio, teachers' biographies, cost breakdown of the programs. But having all that information at your fingertip can make you more efficient. Create a separate file for the school catalog on your computer. As you develop each chapter of the catalog, keep your files organized. Establish a system and stick with it. Otherwise, you will end up with multiple versions of the same narrative, and the only way you'll be able to tell which is the newest is by going through the tedious process of checking the dates when they were created and modified. And I'm speaking from experience here. So the way I solved my problem, I created by putting dates right next to the document name. If you run into difficulties with a chapter, leave it for the time being and move on to an easier one. Like describing your facility and copying and pasting teachers' biographies may be the easy task, and creating your mission and goals or writing a narrative about the programs you offer can be more challenging and time-consuming. And one more suggestion, make up your mind that you're going to tackle this project, make it a priority, stick with it until it's done. You can delegate the project to someone else, or either spend every free moment working on this task, or you can make weekly plans, set aside a couple of hours once or twice a week. Either way, make a commitment and be consistent. A side note here, I compiled a list of data that may be useful to gather before you begin writing your catalog. After this presentation, we will email that list and the PSAP template to all of you who are attending today. So check your email later. So if we look at the school catalog in a context of students' education, it actually outlines the whole process of creating a Pilates teacher. Through your school catalog, you're telling a story about your school because education is a process. Student goes through admission procedure, enrolls into a program, studies the program that the school offers, fulfills all the requirements, and graduates. So education is also a cycle. And all of the steps of that cycle are documented in the school catalog. Each school catalog is unique because each school is unique. That is a fact that some of us may not realize, and we tend to think that our school catalog is never going to be anything but a cookie-cutter document. Meanwhile, even if schools teach the same lineage, there are bound to be intricacies in method of delivery, assessments, goals, and values the school wants to instill in future teachers. And when a prospective student reads our school catalog, ultimately we would like them to be able to picture themselves be a part of our school. In reality, of course, not everyone who reads a catalog will enroll in the school. But we all should have an idea of our target audience, a compatible student, when we record all the information about how our school works. If you put generic information in, you may attract everyone and no one in particular. You will enroll a student that will ultimately drop out, taking a precious spot of someone else who would have been a great student. So if you breathe some life into the catalog, if you put your signature on it, you increase your chances of attracting the right student who will appreciate what you have to offer and will choose your program for its uniqueness. So the first step in sharing your school's uniqueness with the world is to include introduction, mission, and goals. It is an information that prospective students are looking for so they can determine if your school's philosophy aligns with their expectations. The introduction is a concise history of your school. It tells a story of what the origin of your school is, when did you open it, how did you arrive at the point in time and place you're at right now. It is short and to the point. Your school history will always be unlike any other schools. The same when it comes to mission and goals. Even if you had not thought about this until now, you most likely have a certain philosophy with which you determine what and how you teach. And most likely than not, your philosophy differs from other schools' approach. You might be basing your curriculum and methods of teaching on specific lineage or scientific findings. Maybe your school is more focused on combining Pilates and physical therapy. Every school setting is unique. Your school may be small or large, with one teacher or many teachers. You may be offering comprehensive programs that consist of 400 hours or more. And if you get stuck, you can always enlist help of other people that work with you at school. What do they think the philosophy and the niche of the school is? The mission and goals is your school's signature. So a mission statement should at least answer the following questions. What does the school do? What methods are being used? What values is the school passing on to the future Pilates professionals? You should read mission statements of other schools, but ultimately write your own, put it in your own words. Goals are also unique to your school. Goals are for schools as well as for students. They can be long range, for example, overall business philosophy, organizational goals such as reaching certain audience, adding other permanent services such as continuing education courses for graduates. And goals also can be short-term, measured by periods of few months or few years. For example, one of the short-term goals can be have all the graduates become nationally certified Pilates teachers within 2 years, or another goal could be open another location within 3 years. The goals should be reviewed periodically. If your school becomes PSAP approved, typically during a renewal process, you're asked to revisit your goals and update them. Important takeaway here is that all statements must be objective and factually accurate. Objective statements and well-chosen words will convey your message. And by the way, the PSAP template also contains samples of mission statements and goals. And I will read a couple of mission statements of PSAP-approved schools just to give you an idea what they are like. We are committed to provide students with the highest standards of comprehensive Pilates teacher training, deepening the students' understanding of anatomy and enhancing their education in the Pilates method and movement science. And another one, our mission is to carry on the work of Joseph Pilates, to transmit his repertoire of the original exercises, updated with the current scientific research, which has allowed further development through a postural and proprioceptive approach. Focusing on precise execution and correct technique, our students learn how to modify the original repertoire to adapt it to the client's various body types. The next information that the prospective student will be looking for is how and what they can learn at your school. So let's talk about the programs and courses offered. This is one of the chapters that can be challenging to write because we really need to get into the level of details that someone who's reading about it for the first time needs. Here you should list the programs you offer and describe each one of them separately. The more detailed the description, the better the picture you paint for the student of what they can expect to study and what their learning process will look like at your school. So be as descriptive as possible. It is a good way to attract the right students because just a breakdown of hours and assessment is not always very indicative of what it feels like to go through the program. Describe the structure of the program. Does it consist of units, modules, or do you have some other system? Describe the components of the program, lectures, workshops, practical hours. Describe each one of these components separately in terms of number of hours or duration, if applicable. Provide detailed description of what aspect of the method and what equipment will be covered during each lecture or workshop. Provide detailed description of each component of practical hours. List type of equipment that will be studied. Make sure you include the total number of hours of your program. And keep in mind that if you're applying for PSAP approval, the definition of a comprehensive program is that it has to include minimum of 450 hours on mat and all apparatus: reformer, trapeze table, chair, ladder barrel, magic circle, and spine corrector. Next, you need to include what form of instructions you provide. Are all the instructions given in the classroom setting? Is there an option for distance learning, and in what manner? What types of assessments does your school implement? Quizzes, exams, what types of exams, how many? And finally, explain the timeline of each specific program. Better yet, create a table illustrating a typical timeline of the cycle from commencement to graduation, something visual, so that the students can better picture the time they will be spending getting the education. It can help them plan ahead. Now that the prospective students have read through the program or programs you offer, they will want to know if they can qualify to apply and be considered for admission. Your admission requirements should include minimum age requirement, what is the minimum level of education you require, a minimum proficiency in Pilates method, if applicable, and or other requirements that may be specific to your school and program you offer. To protect the school and not be accused of discrimination, the following verbiage should be included in the catalog. No applicant will be denied on the basis of race, national origin, color, creed, religion, sex, age, disability, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. This statement is included in the template for you to copy. Now it's time to delve into the financial aspect of each program. This chapter is also one of the more challenging ones, and because we need here to be as accurate as possible. I will use the PSAP template to illustrate. Here, list costs separately for each program you offer. List fees, application fee, registration fee. Some schools may or may not have one or both of those fees. It is up to the school. List tuition and explain what is included into tuition, and then list all the other expenses not included in the tuition, for example, such as books, cost of exams, include costs to retake exams if applicable, and lessons. It is acceptable to post an approximate cost here, but I will expand on this issue in a moment. Also, list studio rental fees if it's not included in tuition, student liability insurance, software programs, subscriptions to online resources, and any other cost the student will have to cover to take the program. And finally, give the total cost of the program. So all these items I mentioned are straightforward, except the cost of lessons. If all the lessons cost the same, that is just simple math. But let's look at an example that often happens in our reality. Let's say your program requires of the student to take 50 lessons. And according to your rules, all 50 lessons should preferably be taken as privates, but you allow a small percentage to be group classes. Depending on what that percentage may be, the total cost of the program will change and should be presented as a reasonable range, as small as possible, of maybe maximum of $500. To better illustrate the issue, let's just put it in a context. If the program costs between $5,000 and $6,000, a range of $1,000 represents between 16 and 20% of the cost of the program. That's too big of a range to consider reasonable. The bottom line is that the student should not have to do math while reviewing the catalog to understand the total cost or the reasonable range of the cost of each program that you offer. Also, some of the costs will be different for transfer students, so think about your credit transfer policy and include it in your catalog. So after learning about the program your school offers, the cost and admission requirements, you want the student to know what is involved in enrollment procedure, one step closer to commencement. The enrollment procedures include a number of steps that are required for the student to be enrolled in a specific program. One of them is signing an enrollment agreement. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the enrollment agreement is a legally binding contract between the school and the student. When the student signs the enrollment agreement, they also confirm that they read the content of the school catalog. Enrollment procedure also includes educating students about the school's sexual harassment procedure and how the school handles student grievance. I also make students sign access to student file form so that they are aware of having the right to see their files. I feel like that is also my contribution to keeping the school's practices transparent. So I want to briefly talk about the sexual harassment policy and student grievance procedures since they're a part of the enrollment process. It is school's responsibility to the student to have the sexual harassment procedure and student grievance procedure in place. To help you with this one, there's a sexual harassment procedure template available on PSAP website. It provides definition, examples, and procedure to follow in case of the complaint. The student must sign and acknowledge that they read and will abide by the school's rules. In your narrative, include answers to the following questions. Who is the contact person to oversee the complaint? If you're a one-person operation, can you bring in someone to have a neutral voice? What is the process of filing a complaint? How many days will you take to investigate the matter? How to report to the state's licensing body, if applicable. Now that the enrollment procedure is clearly defined, it is time to describe the learning environment. Here you provide information on what kind of learning environment will the school make available for the student to facilitate their successful graduation. Who are the teachers that will be shaping the education of the new student? Present your faculty to the public, listing their biographies and credentials and what jobs they hold in the school will add to helping the student form a better picture of your school, perhaps help see themselves study at your school. Also describe the facility the student will be using to study, square footage of the studio and teaching areas, amenities, list all the Pilates equipment for student access, and all other learning tools and educational services that you offer, such as access to a library, whether it's online or brick and mortar or both, anatomical models and charts, videos, apps, and any other resources to assist students in completing their program. If you offer financial aid, housing, or job placement assistance, let the prospective students know. These are all incentives for many people who are looking to learn a new profession. So what happens next in our story about the school? After describing the enrollment procedure, next make sure that the prospective student learns about how the studying process at your school works. So write narratives about your attendance requirements, grading system, progress policy, and conduct policy. To make it easier for you, the PSAP template provides you with a list of questions to be answered for each of these policies. Also, describe clearly the graduation requirements and what designation will the student be awarded, certificate of completion or diploma. Include the following verbiage. When all requirements for graduation are met, student receives a diploma or certificate of completion. Completion of the comprehensive Pilates program does not guarantee employment or certification. These statements are meant to protect the school from graduates making a claim that they were promised something else than they have received. First of all, you may or may not hire your graduates, so you do not want them to expect an automatic job offer from you upon graduation. And there is still quite a confusion out there as to the difference between certificate and certification, so I just wanted to touch on that. Certificate is what a graduate receives from a teacher training school. Certification has to be issued by a third party. For Pilates teachers, it is the National Pilates Certification Program that awards the Nationally Certified Pilates Teacher title to comprehensively educated Pilates teachers who have passed the exam. If you explain well what is involved in studying at your school and what exactly the students should expect to do and learn, you're setting parameters for responsibilities, expectations, and success. And this is a factor that most likely will increase your graduation rate or at least spare you a dispute. All of the above information is useful when all is well with the student and the school, but you also must include policies and procedures that you have in case there is trouble. If there's trouble for students with continuing the program, maybe they're not progressing as planned, you should include your policy on time extension for program completion. Does your school allow it? What duration? How many extensions do you allow? And what is the cost associated with it? If a student is experiencing medical issues, has family emergency, or becomes pregnant, your leave of absence policy must include eligibility requirements, documentation needed, and the length of time permitted. You also need to include what happens to the monies paid in case the student does not come back. If the student violates the conduct policy, you should include a policy for dismissal in the catalog. Also be prepared in case the school is experiencing unforeseen problems and the program may have to be postponed or discontinued. Additionally, Aside from what happens to the monies paid in case the school or the student is in trouble, you need to also consider what happens if a student is not accepted to the school but has paid an application fee or gave a deposit. And then two more scenarios that may take place and need to be considered: student withdraws before or after commencement. In case of all these various situations, the school has to be ready to deal with refunding the monies to students. So one of the most important policies for the school is a comprehensive refund policy, because it sets clear guidelines as to what happens to the monies paid to the school by the student when the student does not complete the program. Defining the refund policy rules and writing a narrative about it has been known to cause a lot of headaches among some PSAP applicants. If your state requires the Pilates school to be licensed, then you need to look into your state's specific requirements. If you cannot receive guidance from your state, use the refund policy that is in the PSAP template. That refund policy was created based on requirements from various states. In writing a narrative, you need to determine the following. What is the time frame within which the refund will be made? What is the amount, if any, of cancellation charge? What is the date of termination or withdrawal? What is the refund policy for the whole program? And what is it for modules? You also need to describe if there are any fees that are excluded from refunding, like books or materials or student liability insurance. Explain these exclusions so there is no further grounds for dispute. Generally, it is required for any educational institution that if the student has completed less than 50% of the program, the student should be entitled to a refund. This is a refund policy in the PSAP template. It explains exactly the amount of money that student is entitled to at each stage of the program. And to give you a better understanding, it also provides an example of a refund based on 48-week program and tuition of $6,000 paid in full. But the most important takeaway here is that detailed refund policy protects the school and the student. It eliminates grounds for dispute, and it generates trust that the school will not take advantage of the student. Having a detailed refund policy is not only a good business practice, but it is also every state's requirement for an educational institution. And if your school catalog is clear and transparent and you attract the right student, you may never have to use the refund policy. Your catalog should be available for download. If you apply for PSAP approval, the catalog must be published. So because it is your intellectual property, make sure that you indicate that by including the copyright symbol, your name, and the year you have created your school catalog. This is the minimum you can do right away to protect your property. And I just wanted to address one more issue that I have personally struggled with in the past, and some of you may relate to it. The fear of putting all your information out there for all to see. The notion that your programs and the way you run your school should be a secret, shared only with a few, is misleading. When you take the step to put your information out there, it will be liberating. It will make you feel legit and boost your confidence as an educator. I don't think we have ever heard of big caliber educational institutions such as colleges hiding information from the consumer. We're undermining our profession and our industry if we hide what we do. Sharing, and especially sharing with your fellow Pilates educators, can only make us better. We can learn from each other and strengthen the status of our profession. The true essence and the uniqueness of your program cannot be copied. The other fear is that if people read your catalog online, they will never make a phone call to your school and you will lose an opportunity to pitch them your sale. You can solve this issue by embedding in your school catalog an action button or a phrase that may prompt the reader to connect to you by email or other means of messaging you instantly to ask a clarifying question. Because really, if you have to convince someone to sign up with you by highlighting selected qualities of your program that they will find appealing right there over the phone, that's not the student you want. That student is trouble. You want a person who gets all of the information about your program, the enticing and the tedious, and because of knowing it all about how your school works and what the requirements are, wants to study with you. That's the student that will graduate and go on to talk about it. That's the student you want. Thank you. Oriane, I think you'd like attendees to complete a short survey and then we'll take questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Joanna. It was a really great presentation and the information was really valuable. So I hope you all enjoyed it. So before we get into the questions, I would like to ask all of you to complete a very short survey about this webinar. So it's only 4 questions. It's going to be super quick. It's going to take you less than a minute. And after that, Joanna will answer your questions. So feel free to type them now in the chat if you haven't done so already, or right after you've completed the survey. All right, Joanna, would you like to take a few questions?
Yes. So the first question that we have is, how often should I update my school catalog? So personally, my school is a small school and not much changes in terms of program delivery and policies, but I look at my school catalog every few months. But if any aspect of your school changes, you should update your catalog. And if your school is a PSAP approved, you're asked to update your catalog at the renewal. Another question that we have, how long did it take you to write a catalog? I wrote the catalog in the midst of applying for the PSAP approval, which took me about 6 months to complete. So I would say I probably spent a month on the catalog, but I worked on it mostly on the weekends. Another question we have, do I have to follow the order of the table of contents that is in the PSAP template? Well, in my opinion, the way that the template is arranged makes sense. It begins with introducing your school, then the programs that you offer, and it ends with policies and procedure. But it is not mandatory to follow that template. So as long as your order has common sense, has logic to it, then you don't need to follow the order of the table of contents that's in the PSAP template. Another question that we have here is, what program did you use to create your school catalog? So my school catalog is simple in design. So I used Microsoft Office and just embedded my school's logo on every page and used different color and font size to highlight various sections. But that's about as fancy as I went because I wanted it to be easy to be accessed. And I know that you can also convert it to a PDF file so that it's not easy for people to modify it and call it their own. Why do I have to have a refund policy? That's another question. My school is small, apprenticeship-based. My students have access to my expertise constantly. I share with them everything I know. So that is a very good question, and I think that we can all relate to it. I know I can, because we're sharing with our students all the knowledge we have. It is very hard to quantify that. That is even more of a reason to have a refund policy for our protection, because an unhappy student, it only takes one unhappy student, and an unhappy student will go to the end of the earth to get their money back, however much they imagine they may be entitled to. And I also was one of the people that did not believe I needed a refund policy until I was ordered to return half of the money I was paid. And it didn't matter how much of my knowledge I already gave to the student, because I didn't have any policy to back it up. So I think that we should have rules that guide our business practices. Otherwise, someone else who does not know anything about our business will dictate the rules for us. I see that there are some questions pertaining to PSAP. Oriane, would you like to answer them?
Yes, absolutely. So the first question is, my question is, how long do we have to have the program in place to apply for PSAP? The answer is that you have to have delivered the program for at least 2 years, and you need to have at least 2 graduating classes. If you have any questions about the standards that you have to meet, you can go to our website and you will see there is a PDF that you can download with all the requirements that you need to meet. One thing I want to say is that the application process takes a little bit of time. You have 10 standards to meet. You have to write narratives and attach documents. So if you haven't reached the 2-year mark just yet, you can absolutely start an application and work on it a little bit and then wait for the 2-year mark to submit it. The second question is, will there be a print version of the PowerPoint for the participants? So this is more about how this webinar works. There will not be a print version of the PowerPoint. However, we are recording the webinar. So you are free to watch this recording again and again and again, and you can hit pause at any time. So you are free to rewatch the presentation, basically. We will post that recording next week. It's going to be on the PSAP's website under resources for school. If you have any trouble finding it, please don't hesitate to email us and we will guide you to find it. Another question is, are schools with multiple host locations in various countries required to pay an annual fee for each location? I'm assuming that we're talking about the fact that a school is PSAP approved and has different locations that are also PSAP approved or want to be PSAP approved. The answer, is yes. Let me explain a little bit. The way that PSAP works is really interesting and very thorough, because we do not just look at your curriculum. We also look at the institutional part of your organization. And that means that we also want to know what your facilities look like, what the equipment looks like. We want to know the teachers. We want to learn about the teachers specific to the location. So when we approve a school, it's a very thorough process to really get to know not only what you teach, but how you teach it and who's involved and where it all happens. Meaning that each school, each location has to be PSAP approved and has to go through its own approval process. And that means that for each approval process, there are fees related to it. Again, if you have questions about this, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to walk you through the process. And one final question for me, for schools in the UK, some aspects will be different to USA. Is there guidance for that, or just for us to interpret accordingly? So I don't have general guidelines that are true for every single country. We do understand that the standards were written with US schools in mind, but you might have noticed that we have schools that are approved all over the world, and it is absolutely not a problem. So for every standard, if you find that something is not quite applicable because you live outside of the US, you can either maybe find a way to explain how it works in your country, or if you're a bit stuck, you don't really know how to do it, again, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help. Being in a different country has absolutely never stopped any school to apply and to become PSAP approved. So please, feel free to go for it, and we will work with you to make sure that all the standards are applicable to you as well. These standards are not hard rules, they're more guidelines that we need to follow and that you need to meet so we can work with you. Joanna, I don't know if there are any more questions that you want to answer or if you want to say a few more words.
I just wanted to answer one more question that I think a lot of people will relate to. I have been training teachers for a long time, never had a catalog. Why should I have one now? Do I have one? Do I have to have one? So here's my opinion. Because the Pilates industry in general is rather unorganized, there are most likely more schools like this that do not have all the documents that are needed for educational institution. And I think this is the time for us to make our own rules and regulations. So when we still can, because at some point someone else like Consumer Affairs Office or Education Department may come and who do not know our business may come and tell us what the rules should be. So I just think food for thought here that we should try to stay ahead of the curve. So that's all the questions we have time for. If your questions were not answered or if you have additional questions, don't hesitate to contact the PSAP staff. And so if you're ready to give your school catalog a professional upgrade, get started by downloading the PSAP template. Thank you and be well.
All right, so this concludes our webinar. Let me remind you that you will receive your certificate for your CEC next week. We will also email you the documents that Joanna mentioned during the presentation. And again, if you'd like to get in touch with us, please don't hesitate to email us at psap@pilatesmethodalliance.org. Please also go visit our website if you need anything, or even just if you're curious. We have a ton of resources that you can use, whether you want to go through PSAP approval or not. We also explain a bit more what PSAP is, so make sure to visit that website. And again, we want to thank you for being here today. We do hope that you and everyone around you stay safe, and thank you so much.